In the wet green half-light of the South American forest, danger does not always arrive with teeth, claws, or the sound of something heavy moving through the leaves. Sometimes it sits in plain sight, no bigger than a thumb, shining like a jewel on a wet leaf. A poison dart frog does not hide the way most small animals hide. It does not flatten itself into the mud or vanish under bark. It steps into the open, wearing colors that seem almost unreasonable in a forest built on camouflage: electric yellow, burning orange, deep blue, black, like polished obsidian, patterns bright enough to look misplaced among moss, roots, and fallen leaves. But this is not decoration. It is a warning system written in color. In biology, this is aposematism, the language of animals that have turned visibility into protection. The message is simple enough for a predator to learn quickly. Remember this color and do not bite it again. On the forest floor, that lesson matters. A frog this small should be easy prey. Birds, snakes, spiders, lizards, and small mammals all move through this world looking for quick protein, and a soft-bodied amphibian should be one of the easiest meals available. But poison dart frogs have changed the rules. Their defense is not speed or armor, it is chemistry. Their skin carries alkaloid toxins, compounds that can make a predator's mouth burn, its muscles fail, or in the most extreme cases, stop the machinery of life itself. The most feared of these compounds is batrachotoxin, a natural poison so powerful that it does not need a dramatic wound or a large dose to become catastrophic. It works at the level where the body becomes electricity. Every movement in an animal's body depends on control. A nerve fires, a muscle contracts, then the system resets. Sodium channels open and close in fractions of a second, allowing signals to pass cleanly through nerves and muscles. Batrachotoxin attacks that reset. It forces sodium channels to remain open, trapping the body in a state of uncontrolled firing. The signal cannot shut off properly. Muscles can no longer coordinate. Nerves lose their rhythm. The heart, which depends on precise electrical timing, can fall into failure. This is why the danger feels so unnerving. The toxin does not simply damage tissue from the outside. It turns the body's own communication system into chaos. Molecular anarchy is not an exaggeration here. It is the mechanism. And yet the frog itself moves calmly through the leaf litter, as if carrying one of nature's most violent chemical weapons is just another part of being small. Its body is moist, delicate, and dependent on the damp world around it. Amphibian skin is not a simple covering. It is a living surface, involved in water balance, respiration, and chemical exchange. That makes frogs vulnerable to drying out, but it also makes their skin an extraordinary biological interface. In poison dart frogs, that interface becomes a defensive wall. The toxins sit in the skin, ready to punish contact. The danger to humans is not from looking at the animal, or from its color, or from the myth that beauty itself is poisonous. The real risk comes when toxin reaches broken skin, the eyes, the mouth, or another mucous membrane. A clean hand is very different from a cut hand. In the forest, that small difference can matter. The strangest part is that the frog is not the original manufacturer of its own chemical reputation. It steals danger from its food. Many poison dart frogs gain their toxins from tiny arthropods, especially ants, mites, and other small invertebrates that carry alkaloids of their own. The frog eats them, absorbs their chemistry, and stores those compounds in its skin. Over generations, this has created one of the most elegant food chain twists in the rainforest. Prey items become chemical ingredients, and a tiny predator becomes toxic because of what it has consumed. Remove that wild diet, and the system collapses. Captive poison dart frogs, raised on harmless feeder insects, often lose their toxicity, becoming bright but chemically empty versions of their wild relatives. The color remains, the weapon fades. That detail changes the way the forest looks. The frog is not a lonely miracle of poison. It is part of a larger chemical economy built from plants, insects, mites, predators, and memory. The alkaloids may begin somewhere lower in the web, passing through tiny bodies that most people would never notice. The frog concentrates that hidden chemistry and turns it into a public warning. Predators then become students. A bird that survives a bitter or painful mistake may avoid the same pattern next time. A snake that mouths the wrong frog may learn that bright color is not worth the cost. In this way, the frog's skin shapes behavior beyond its own body. It teaches the forest what not to eat. For indigenous hunters in parts of South America, that chemistry became knowledge long before laboratories could describe sodium channels. The name poison dart frog comes from the historical use of certain highly toxic frogs to coat blowgun darts for hunting. The image is often simplified, but the underlying reality is profound. People living inside these ecosystems recognized that a small amphibian carried a force powerful enough to transform a dart into a weapon. They understood through observation what modern science later explained through molecular biology. The frog's back was not just skin, it was a reservoir of invisible power. Still, not every poison dart frog is equally dangerous, and not every bright frog carries batrachotoxin. The family contains many species with different colors, behaviors, habitats, and levels of toxicity. Some are intensely poisonous in the wild, others are only mildly defended. Some guard eggs on leaves and transport tadpoles on their backs to tiny pools held in bromeliads or tree holes, turning parenthood into a careful journey through a vertical forest. That parental care is another reason these frogs are more than living warning signs. They are active participants in the rainforest structure, linking the wet ground to the plants above, carrying the next generation through a maze of predators, drying surfaces, and microscopic aquatic nurseries. A poison dart frog is therefore not terrifying because it is aggressive. It is terrifying because it does not need to be. Its power is passive, quiet, and already present before anything attacks. In a world where many animals survive by running, hiding, biting, or overpowering, this frog survives by making the first bite a mistake. Its color gives the warning, its diet supplies the chemistry, its skin holds the consequence. And if the wrong predator ignores that bright little signal on the leaf, the punishment begins not with blood, but with electricity. Nerves firing out of control, muscles losing command, the heart dragged into disorder by a toxin small enough to ride on the surface of a fingertip. That is the perfect opening to molecular anarchy, a forest jewel carrying a weapon that works faster than fear, deeper than pain, and closer to the foundation of life than almost any claw or fang could ever reach. At the edge of a warm, rain-soaked clearing, the marine toad does not look like an animal built around speed. It sits low and heavy in the mud, broad-bodied, blunt-faced, and almost stubbornly calm, while insects move through the wet grass around it. Its skin is rough, warted, and glossy with moisture. Its golden eyes catch the last light under the leaves, not with the nervous flicker of a creature ready to flee, but with the stillness of something that has made a different agreement with danger. In a forest where many animals survive by escaping, climbing, hiding, or striking first, Rhinella marina survives by making itself a terrible decision. It is not trying to outrun the predator. It is waiting for the predator to make contact. This is one of the largest toads in the world, and its real weapon is not hidden in its mouth or limbs, but in the swollen glands behind its eyes. These parotoid glands sit like raised pads on the back of the head and shoulders, filled with a milky chemical defense that can ooze out when the toad is bitten, squeezed, or seriously threatened. To a predator, the toad may look like a slow meal, a lump of protein sitting in the open, too heavy to leap far, too awkward to disappear quickly. But the first bite changes everything. The pressure of jaws against those glands can release bufotoxin directly into the attacker's mouth. And in that moment, the hunt turns into a medical emergency written by evolution. The toxin is not just unpleasant, it is aimed at one of the most unforgiving systems in the body. Bufotoxin contains cardiac active compounds, including bufadienolides, that can interfere with the electrical control of the heart. A normal heartbeat depends on rhythm so precise that life balances on tiny movements of charged particles across cell membranes. The sodium-potassium pump helps maintain that electrical order, keeping cells ready to fire and reset. When that system is disrupted, the heart can lose its timing. Beats may become irregular, weak, or dangerously chaotic. The animal that expected a mouthful of toad suddenly has a body that can no longer keep its most important muscle in command. That is what makes the marine toad such a brutal second beat in the story of molecular anarchy. The poison does not need to tear flesh apart. It does not need to paralyze prey through a dramatic fang strike. It interferes with the hidden machinery that makes every heartbeat possible. The victim may salivate, retch, stagger, tremble, or collapse as the toxin moves across the moist tissues of the mouth. For dogs and many wild predators, this can become fatal within minutes, especially if the dose is high and the animal is small enough for the toxin to overwhelm it quickly. The toad itself remains where it was, blinking in the mud, because the defense was never about winning a fight. It was about making the fight biologically unaffordable. In its native range, this chemical armor is part of a long ecological conversation. Predators that have lived beside these toads for generations may learn to avoid them, attack carefully, or target less dangerous prey. Some animals develop behaviors that reduce exposure because natural selection is not sentimental. It rewards the predator that survives the mistake and punishes the one that does not. But when the marine toad is introduced into ecosystems where native predators have no history with it, that conversation collapses. The toad arrives carrying an old weapon into a new world, and animals that have never learned its warning signs treat it like food. Snakes, lizards, mammals, and birds may attack the same way they would attack a harmless amphibian, only to discover that this particular meal can poison them from the inside out. That is why the cane toad became an ecological catastrophe in places where it was introduced. Its danger is not limited to individual animals. It spreads through food webs. A large predator dies after biting one. A scavenger may investigate the body. A smaller predator learns too late. The toad does not need to chase anything to reshape an ecosystem. It simply survives, breeds, and carries its chemical penalty into every encounter. The irony is sharp but real. An animal that looks clumsy and exposed can become one of the most disruptive forces in a landscape, not because it is physically dominant, but because so many native hunters are not prepared for what happens after contact. The marine toad is also a reminder that amphibian skin is never just skin. Toads live close to water, close to soil, close to the chemistry of the world around them. Their bodies must manage moisture carefully, because drying out can be as dangerous as predation. Their skin participates in water balance and chemical exchange, making it a sensitive border between the body and the environment. In many amphibians, that vulnerability is a weakness. In the marine toad, the same surface becomes part of the defense system. The animal is soft-bodied, but it is not undefended. It has turned its exposed skin into a warning zone. For humans, the danger is usually not from simply seeing the toad or standing near it. The risk comes when the toxin reaches places where the body is open to absorption, the eyes, mouth, or broken skin. A person handling the animal and then rubbing their eyes has created the kind of pathway the toxin needs. A cut on the hand changes the situation. This is not the monster movie version of poison, where danger floats through the air because the animal looks frightening. It is more grounded and more unsettling than that. The toad's chemical defense is real, but it needs contact with vulnerable tissue to become a serious threat. At night, the toad becomes part of a different rhythm. It moves through humid ground after rain, feeding on insects, small invertebrates, and almost anything small enough to fit into its mouth. Its appetite is broad, another reason it succeeds so well in new places. It is not a specialist locked into one fragile food source. It is a survivor with a simple plan: eat widely, reproduce heavily, and make predators regret treating it like easy prey. In the wet darkness, that combination becomes powerful. A large female can produce enormous numbers of eggs, and tadpoles can fill shallow waters where the next generation begins the same strategy again. There is no dedicated antivenom waiting in a clean medical vial to reverse this kind of poisoning. Treatment is supportive, which means the battle becomes a race to manage the body while the toxin does its work. The heart must be monitored. Dangerous rhythms must be controlled if possible. The victim has to be kept alive long enough for the crisis to pass. That is a frightening idea, because the organ under attack is the one organ no animal can pause. You can stop running, you can stop hunting, you can freeze and hide. But the heart has to keep moving, beat after beat, without negotiation. The marine toad's power comes from that terrible simplicity. It does not need elegance, speed, or beauty. It sits in the mud with swollen glands behind its eyes and carries a poison that turns curiosity into collapse. A predator sees a slow amphibian and thinks it has found weakness. Evolution has hidden the answer just beneath the skin. One bite, one mouthful, one careless touch near the eyes, or an open wound, and the body is pulled into a fight against its own rhythm. That is the true horror of this animal. Not a violent attack, but a chemical ambush aimed at the heartbeat itself, with no antidote to call on. Only time, intensive care, and the hope that the rhythm returns before it is too late. On the underside of a fallen Amazon log, where the wood has softened into dark fibers and the air smells of rain, fungus, and old leaves, a long shape begins to move. At first, it is only a ripple in the shadow, a line of legs passing over wet bark with impossible coordination. Then the body emerges, armored plates, copper brown and red, each segment carrying a pair of legs that grips the surface as if the forest itself belongs to it. The Amazonian giant centipede does not move like an insect. It moves like a living trap being pulled across the ground. Scolopendra gigantea can grow close to 30 centimeters long, large enough that the word centipede suddenly feels too harmless, too small, almost childish for what this animal really is. In the darkness of the rainforest floor, it is not a scavenger waiting for scraps. It is an active hunter, built to sense, seize, inject, and hold. Its body tells the story before the strike happens. The long, flattened form slips easily under bark, into burrows, through cracks in walls, and across cave ceilings. Each leg is part of a gripping system, letting the centipede anchor itself while the front of the body does the dangerous work. The first pair of legs has been transformed into something else entirely. Curved venom claws called forcipules. They are not walking legs anymore. They are injection tools, folded beneath the head and driven forward when prey comes close enough. This is one of the reasons the animal feels so unnerving. The weapon is made from legs, as if evolution took a walking machine and turned its front end into a pair of hypodermic hooks. A small frog moving through leaf litter may never see it coming. A cockroach under bark may feel only the sudden pressure of segments closing around it. Even bats, hanging in cave entrances or moving through tight spaces, can become prey. The giant centipede is famous for hunting in places where other predators lose the advantage. Vertical walls, ceilings, hollow trees, dark human rooms, and cave mouths where vibrations travel through stone and air. It does not need daylight. It does not need a clear trail. It reads the world through touch, chemical cues, and the fine sensory hairs along its legs, which detect tiny disturbances from nearby movement. A small animal shifting its weight can become a signal. A wing-brushing stone can become a location. In a forest full of noise, the centipede listens through its body. When the strike comes, it is fast and practical. The forcipules clamp in. The rest of the body folds around the prey, leg after leg, gripping, pressing, controlling. This is not a clean bite from a single mouth. It is a whole body attack. The prey is pinned by a living chain while venom is forced into tissue from the front. For a mouse, lizard, frog, or bat, that combination is devastating because escape depends on movement, and movement becomes harder the longer the centipede holds on. The hunter does not need to overpower prey with jaws alone. It turns its entire body into the restraint system, while the venom begins its disorder beneath the skin. That venom is not simple. This is where Scolopendra becomes more than a frightening shape in the dark. Unlike an animal whose danger can be explained by one famous toxin, the giant centipede carries a chemical mixture. Its venom can include compounds such as serotonin, histamine, acetylcholine, and a range of proteins and peptides that affect tissue, nerves, blood vessels, and sometimes the heart. Each component does something different. Some intensify pain, some trigger inflammation, some affect muscle and nerve signaling, some damage cells directly. The result is not a single locked door that medicine can open with the right key. It is a room full of switches being thrown at once. That is why the logic of antivenom breaks down here. An antivenom usually works best when it has a defined target, a venom profile that can be studied, prepared against, and neutralized with antibodies. Centipede envenomation does not have that kind of clean medical answer. There is no widely available antivenom waiting for a Scolopendra bite. Treatment is built around what the body is suffering in the moment, controlling pain, cleaning and caring for the wound, reducing complications, and watching for systemic reactions if the venom spreads beyond the local tissue. The doctor can treat the fire, the swelling, the shock, the infection risk, and the dangerous symptoms. But there is no simple vial that reaches into the bloodstream and switches the venom off. For humans, the bite is rarely fatal, but that does not make it minor. People describe centipede bites as severe, burning, crushing pain, often followed by dramatic swelling and redness around the wound. The area can throb as if the body is overreacting to a tiny puncture, but the body is not overreacting. It is responding to a chemical attack designed to overwhelm smaller animals quickly. In some cases, symptoms can spread beyond the bite site, bringing nausea, dizziness, fever, weakness, or irregular reactions that make the encounter feel much larger than the wound looks. Rare deaths have been reported, especially in vulnerable victims such as children, which gives the animal a place in human fear that is not built only on exaggeration. The danger is real, even if the usual outcome is survival with a memory that does not fade quickly. In the Amazon, that pain has an ecological purpose. Venom is expensive to make, and no predator wastes chemistry without pressure from the world around it. The centipede lives among animals that bite back, kick, flee, hide in tight spaces, or poison the hunter in return. A frog may be slippery, a lizard may twist, a small mammal may struggle hard enough to injure the attacker. The venom has to work across different prey types because the centipede is a generalist predator. It cannot afford a weapon that only works on one kind of victim. A chemical cocktail gives it flexibility. Pain, inflammation, tissue damage, nerve disruption, and cardiovascular effects are not random cruelty. They are a broad-spectrum hunting strategy. There is something almost unfair about that design. The centipede does not announce itself with bright colors like a poison frog. It does not sit in the open like a toad, daring predators to bite. It comes from the hidden parts of the landscape, under sleeping mats, in boots, inside rotting logs, across damp walls, along the ceiling of a cave. That is why encounters feel so personal. Humans are not its prey, but human spaces can accidentally become part of its hunting ground. A hand reaching into wood, a foot sliding into a shoe, a child touching a strange shape on the wall. These are not dramatic jungle mistakes. They are ordinary movements crossing the path of an animal built for sudden contact. Yet to reduce Scolopendra to horror alone would miss what makes it extraordinary. This is an ancient solution to life in a crowded, wet, competitive world. The centipede is an engineer of predation without a backbone, without eyes that need to dominate the hunt, without the speed of a cat or the crushing bite of a reptile. It survives through segmentation, sensory precision, grip, and chemistry. Every part of it contributes. The flattened body that enters narrow spaces, the legs that read vibration, the claws that inject venom, the flexible trunk that wraps prey, the toxins that turn resistance into collapse. In the dark Amazon, where so many animals live by becoming invisible, Scolopendra gigantea is the nightmare version of hidden efficiency. It does not kill with one elegant molecule or one famous poison. It brings disorder in layers, a chemically messy venom that gives medicine nothing simple to lock onto. The clean idea of antivenom has no easy answer here. There is only the bite, the swelling, the burning pain, the wound that must be managed, and the body forced to ride out whatever the cocktail has started. A centipede on the wall may look like a line of legs and armor, but inside that moving shadow is a predator carrying one of the rainforest's most chaotic weapons, not a single bullet, but an entire storm in liquid form. Deep in the Amazon understory, where the air stays warm even after rain and the ground is crowded with roots, fallen fruit, fungus and leaf litter, one of the forest's most feared animals moves almost silently along a tree trunk. It is not large enough to crush bone. It has no fangs like a snake, no jaws like a caiman, and no bright skin, warning, like a poison frog. But Paraponera clavata, the bullet ant, carries a reputation that reaches far beyond its size. At up to 3 centimeters long, it is enormous for an ant, dark and glossy, with long legs, powerful mandibles, and the slow, deliberate movement of an insect that does not need to behave nervously. In a forest full of predators, parasites, and chemical defenses, this ant has built its survival around a weapon that does not simply hurt. It takes control of pain itself. The bullet ant lives in a world where every surface is contested. Tree bases become highways, wet bark becomes hunting ground. Leaf litter hides spiders, centipedes, beetles, frogs, and other ants, all moving through the same tight layer of forest. Colonies often nest near the bases of trees, where workers climb, forage, defend territory, and search for nectar or small prey. The forest floor is not quiet at their scale. It vibrates with footfalls, falling droplets, insect wings, and the tiny impacts of life constantly touching life. To an ant, these signals matter. A disturbance near the nest is not just background noise. It may be an enemy, a predator, or a large animal stepping too close to the colony's living infrastructure. Before the sting, there is often a warning. Bullet ants can produce a sharp, stridulating sound, a shriek-like signal made by rubbing body parts together. In the human imagination, ants are usually silent workers, tiny machines carrying leaves or crumbs. But this one can announce danger before it delivers it. That warning is not theatrical. It is efficient. Stinging costs energy, and in the natural world, even violence is expensive. A warning gives another animal a chance to leave. If the warning is ignored, the ant has another language, and that language is venom. The sting is delivered from the rear of the body, but the experience spreads far beyond the puncture. The active agent, toxin, is a peptide that affects voltage-gated sodium channels, the same kind of electrical gateways that allow nerves and muscles to send signals. Normal pain has rhythm. A nerve is irritated, a signal fires, the body responds, and eventually the alarm fades. Toxin corrupts that timing. It interferes with the channels that allow nerves to reset, forcing pain signals to continue when they should be shutting down. The result is not the quick flare of a bee sting or the brief sharp shock of a thorn. It is a signal that refuses to end. This is why the bullet ant sits at the top of the Schmidt Sting Pain Index, the highest rating ever given to an insect sting. Entomologist Justin Schmidt famously described it as pure, intense, brilliant pain, like walking over flaming charcoal with a 3-inch nail in your heel. The power of that description is not just the imagery. It captures the strange cruelty of the sting. The feeling is not only intense, but sustained, bright, and impossible to ignore. The body keeps reporting disaster from one small point of contact, as if the nervous system has been locked into emergency mode and left there. The defining horror is duration. Many stings are terrible for a few minutes, then begin to soften. The bullet ant does not follow that mercy. Its pain can build in waves and last up to 24 hours, often accompanied by sweating, trembling, nausea, and uncontrollable shaking. Multiple stings can bring temporary paralysis of the affected limb, turning pain into something heavier than sensation. The arm or leg may feel less like part of the body and more like an object trapped inside a storm. This is where the story of antivenom becomes more complicated. No antidote does not always mean death. Sometimes it means there is no switch, no clean reversal, no elegant chemical rescue. The victim is alive, conscious, and forced to endure the full length of what the venom has started. For the ant, this is not cruelty. It is defense sharpened by evolution. A colony is a valuable target. Many animals raid nests for eggs, larvae, and workers, and a social insect cannot afford to defend itself only as an individual. Its body is part of a larger organism, the colony. One worker that stings a threat is protecting the queen, the brood, the nest structure, and the labor of thousands of related lives. Pain becomes communication across species. A mammal that disturbs the nest and receives that sting may remember the tree, the odor, the dark ants on the bark, and the mistake. A predator that survives the encounter may not need to be killed. It only needs to be taught never to repeat the lesson. That lesson has also entered human culture in one of the most extreme ways possible. Among the Satere Mawe people of the Brazilian Amazon, bullet ants are used in a coming-of-age ritual in which boys place their hands inside gloves woven with live ants, their stingers facing inward. The ordeal lasts around 10 minutes and is repeated many times before a boy is considered to have completed the process. Seen from outside the culture, the image is almost difficult to process. Hundreds of stings, deliberate endurance, pain transformed into a social threshold. But inside that ritual is an old understanding of the forest. The bullet ant is not a random source of suffering. It is a measure of control, courage, and the body's ability to survive what it cannot stop. In ecological terms, the bullet ant occupies an unusual space. It is predator, scavenger, defender, and warning sign. It feeds within the complex economy of the forest, taking nectar, small arthropods, and resources gathered through patient movement across trees and ground. At the same time, it is prey to animals that can tolerate or avoid its defenses. No creature is untouchable in the Amazon. Even the most painful sting on Earth exists inside a web of risk. But the bullet ant has pushed that risk outward. Anything that tries to disturb it must pay immediately through the nervous system. The physical wound may look almost insulting in its smallness, a tiny puncture. A mark that hardly seems capable of explaining what follows. That contrast is part of the terror. The forest does not need large injuries to create large consequences. A fang can open flesh, a toxin can stop a heart. But the bullet ant proves that pain alone can become a weapon powerful enough to dominate memory. It does not liquefy tissue or flood the body with bacteria. It takes the body's own alarm system and pins it wide open. Under the dark canopy, the ant continues across the bark as if carrying nothing extraordinary at all. Its legs test the surface. Its antennae read chemical traces. Around it, the Amazon keeps moving. Frogs calling from wet hollows, beetles cutting through rot, birds shifting overhead, rain gathering on leaves before falling in heavy drops. The bullet ant is just one small worker inside that giant machine, but its sting reveals one of the forest's deepest truths. Survival is not always about killing. Sometimes it is about making contact unforgettable. Sometimes the most effective weapon is not the one that ends life quickly, but the one that forces every nerve in the body to remember exactly where the boundary was crossed. That is the brutal power of Paraponera clavata. Antivenom is useless here, not because the venom is always fatal, but because medicine has no simple way to switch the pain off. The body must wait while the signal burns through its full sentence. In the story of molecular anarchy, the bullet ant is the chapter where the victim survives, but survival itself becomes the punishment. A full day trapped inside a nervous system that cannot stop screaming. On the Amazon forest floor, where fallen leaves hold the day's heat and rainwater darkens the soil into a living skin, danger can pass almost silently under the debris. A coral snake does not need the heavy body of a constrictor or the open threat display of a viper. It moves like a ribbon through the leaf litter, narrow, polished, and strangely delicate, its body marked in rings of red, yellow, black, and white, depending on the species. In a forest where camouflage is usually the first language of survival, those colors are not an accident. They are a warning written in bands. Many predators read it well enough to hesitate. Some mimics borrow the pattern and bluff their way through the same world. But when the animal is a true Micrurus coral snake, the color is not theater. It is the edge of one of the most dangerous neurotoxic systems in the rainforest. The strange thing is how small and shy the animal can seem. A coral snake is not a snake built for intimidation. It usually avoids confrontation, slipping under roots, into loose soil, beneath logs, or through the damp tunnels made by other animals. Its prey is often other slender creatures of hidden places, small snakes, lizards, amphibians, and burrowing animals that share the same tight layer of the forest. It is a specialist of close spaces, hunting in a world where vision is limited and contact happens quickly. Short, fixed fangs deliver venom when the snake bites. But this is not the dramatic, open-mouthed strike people imagine from larger vipers. Many coral snake bites happen because the animal is stepped on, grabbed, or handled by someone who mistakes it for a harmless mimic or underestimates it because of its size. That underestimation is exactly what makes the venom so dangerous. A viper bite often announces itself immediately with swelling, burning pain, bruising, and tissue damage. The body understands at once that something serious has happened. A coral snake bite can be quieter. There may be little pain, little swelling, and almost no visible drama at the wound. The skin does not always scream the truth. A victim may look at the bite and see 2 small marks, or almost nothing at all, and decide the danger has passed. In the Amazon, where distance already makes every medical emergency harder, that false calm becomes part of the venom's strategy. The clock starts before fear does. Inside the body, the venom is not sleeping. Coral snake venoms are primarily neurotoxic, targeting the communication between nerves and muscles. Every movement depends on that conversation. A nerve sends a signal, a muscle receives it. The eyelids lift, the tongue shapes words, the chest expands, the diaphragm pulls air into the lungs. Neurotoxins interfere with that transfer, turning the body's own wiring into a broken message chain. The first signs can seem almost gentle compared to the threat beneath them: drooping eyelids, blurred vision, weakness, difficulty speaking clearly, trouble swallowing. But those symptoms reveal something terrifying. The venom is moving from the hidden bite site into the systems that allow the body to obey itself. As hours pass, the danger becomes more direct. Muscles that are easy to forget become the center of survival. Breathing is not just air entering the body, it is muscle coordination, nerve signaling, and rhythm repeated thousands of times a day without conscious thought. When those signals weaken, the lungs may still be intact, the throat may still be open, and the air may still be there, but the body can no longer move it properly. The victim does not suffocate because the snake crushed anything. The body suffocates because the command to breathe is being chemically erased. This is where the antivenom problem becomes cruel in a different way. With some animals, there is no antidote at all. With coral snakes, antivenom can exist, and when given early enough, it can make the difference between recovery and catastrophe. But early treatment depends on early recognition, fast transport, and availability. Coral snake venom defeats that clean medical logic by being quiet at the start. The bite can look minor during the same hours when antivenom would matter most. By the time the real symptoms appear, the the venom may already be deeply bound to its targets, and the best window for neutralizing what is still circulating may have narrowed. The cure exists on paper, but biology, geography, and human delay can make it arrive too late. In remote Amazon regions, that problem becomes even harder. A clinic may be far away, by boat, dirt road, or footpath. Rain can change a journey, night can slow it, communication can fail. And even when someone reaches medical care, the exact antivenom needed may not be stocked. Coral snake antivenom has faced shortages and production gaps in different regions, and the species involved matters because venom composition can vary. A hospital cannot treat a theoretical patient with a theoretical vial. The antivenom has to be real, nearby, and given in time. That is why this snake fits so perfectly into the darker side of molecular anarchy. Sometimes the antidote is not absent from science, but absent from the moment. If breathing begins to fail, the fight changes completely. Survival may depend less on neutralizing the venom and more on keeping the body alive until the toxin's effects wear down. A ventilator can do what weakening muscles cannot, pushing air through the crisis while the nervous system slowly recovers its command. That image is colder than the usual fear of snakes. The bite may be nearly painless. The wound may remain unimpressive. But somewhere inside, the connection between nerve and muscle is being interrupted, and the final rescue may be a machine breathing for a person while medicine waits for chemistry to loosen its grip. The coral snake's warning colors still matter in the forest. The old rhyme about red touching yellow is familiar, but it is not a universal law and should never be trusted across all species and regions. Nature is messier than memory tricks. In the Amazon, mimicry creates confusion because harmless snakes can resemble dangerous ones, and dangerous ones can vary in pattern. The safer lesson is simpler. Bright-ringed snakes should not be handled. The forest has already marked them as animals that deserve distance. There is no malice in the coral snake. It is not a hunter of humans, not an aggressive shadow waiting to attack. It is a small predator trying to survive among animals that would kill and eat it if they could. Its venom evolved for prey and defense, not for drama. But the consequences of a mistake are severe because its weapon targets the quiet machinery of movement itself. A foot lands in the wrong place. A hand reaches into leaves. A colorful snake is picked up out of curiosity. The bite feels like almost nothing, and that almost nothing becomes the most dangerous part. By the time the eyelids begin to fall and speech starts to blur, the forest's bright warning has already become an internal silence. Muscles wait for signals that no longer arrive cleanly. Breath becomes labor. The body remains awake inside a system slowly losing command. That is the late horror of the coral snake. Not violence, not swelling, not visible destruction, but delay. The antidote may exist, but distance, scarcity, and the venom's quiet beginning can make it useless when it matters most. In the Amazon, the smallest ringed shadow under the leaves can turn time itself into the enemy. In the deepest Amazon rainforest, where the canopy closes so tightly that daylight arrives in broken green fragments, the forest floor belongs to animals that can wait. Leaves fall, fungi soften wood, insects move through the rot, and warm-blooded creatures leave brief signatures in the darkness without ever knowing they have been noticed. Here, far from roads and cleared land, the Bushmaster rests like a living section of the forest itself. Lachesis muta is not a snake that needs to advertise every breath. Its body can stretch longer than many people are tall, with large individuals documented at extraordinary lengths, making it the largest venomous snake in the Western Hemisphere. Yet for all its size, it can disappear with unsettling ease among dead leaves, buttress roots, and the patterned shadows of primary rainforest. The Bushmaster is a viper built around patience. Its body is heavy, muscular, and cryptically marked, designed to break up its outline against the leaf litter. It does not chase through the forest like a restless predator. It waits where a trail, burrow, root corridor, or animal pathway brings life within range. Small mammals moving through the night may never see the head angled slightly above the ground, or the heat-sensing pits set between the eyes and nostrils. Those pits are not simple holes in the face. They are infrared detectors, biological instruments sensitive enough to read the warmth of a living body in darkness. In a forest where visibility can vanish completely, the Bushmaster can still locate the shape of blood and breath. That sensory world is difficult to imagine from a human point of view. We think of night as emptiness until a sound or movement gives something away. To a pit viper, night is not empty. A mouse is a warm outline. A bird resting low is a pulse of heat. A careless mammal near the ground becomes a signal against the cooler background of wet leaves and roots. From close range, the Bushmaster does not need a second chance. The strike is faster than conscious reaction, a sudden release of stored muscle that turns stillness into impact before the victim has fully understood that danger was there. The bite is only the beginning. The Bushmaster does not defeat antivenom because science has no idea what venom is. It defeats the rescue system in a more brutal, physical way: volume. A large Bushmaster can inject a massive quantity of venom in a single bite, and antivenom works by neutralizing a certain amount of venom with a certain amount of antibodies. A vial is not a magic spell, it has limits. If the venom load is enormous, the number of vials needed rises with it. In a remote clinic with only a small supply, the treatment can be overwhelmed before it has a chance to catch up. The cure exists, but the strike has arrived as a flood. Inside the body, that flood becomes a cascade. Bushmaster venom is dominated by destructive enzymes and proteins that attack blood, vessels, tissue, and clotting. Phospholipase A2 can damage cell membranes and contribute to the breakdown of blood cells and tissue. Metalloproteinases can injure the walls of blood vessels, allowing bleeding to spread from the place where the fangs entered. Serine proteases interfere with the careful chemistry of clotting, disturbing the body's ability to seal damage. The result is not one simple symptom. It is a system losing control from several directions at once. Blood leaking where it should stay contained, pressure falling, tissue around the bite swelling and dying, and the body struggling to decide whether to clot or bleed. This is what makes a serious Bushmaster bite so frightening. The venom does not stay polite and local. It can spread consequences through circulation, while the bite site itself becomes a center of swelling, pain, bruising, and tissue destruction. The body is trying to defend itself, but every defense depends on order. Vessels holding their shape, blood carrying oxygen, clotting factors responding correctly, pressure staying high enough to feed the brain and organs. The venom attacks that order. A person may begin with a wound in the leg or hand, but the crisis can become whole-body shock, where survival depends on rapid treatment, enough antivenom, fluid support, monitoring, and the ability to manage complications before they outrun the rescuers. And this is where geography becomes part of the venom. The Bushmaster belongs to deep forest, the kind of habitat that still keeps distance as a weapon. A bite may happen many hours from a hospital capable of handling it properly. The path out may be a river, not a road. Rain can raise water, swallow tracks, and turn travel into a slow negotiation with mud, current, and darkness. Even when people move quickly, the forest does not move out of the way. Every minute belongs to the venom. Every bend in the river is time. Every delay between bite and treatment allows the cascade to dig deeper into the body. In that sense, the Bushmaster does not need to be common to be legendary. Indigenous people across parts of its range have long treated it with serious respect, and names like Matabwe, the cattle killer, carry the weight of an animal believed capable of bringing down large prey and livestock. Whether every story grows in the telling is less important than the biological truth underneath it. This is a snake with the size, venom yield, and delivery system to make a bite an overwhelming event. It is not dangerous because it is aggressive toward humans. It is dangerous because the rare encounter can be catastrophically mismatched. A human foot enters the wrong patch of leaves, a hand reaches too close to a hidden coil, and the forest's quietest giant answers at full strength. The Bushmaster's ecology is not villainy. It is the result of a predator living in a world where large meals are worth waiting for and where one successful strike can matter more than constant movement. As an ambush hunter, it saves energy in a habitat where heat, humidity, and competition shape every decision. It uses camouflage to avoid unnecessary conflict. It uses heat detection to remove the disadvantage of darkness. It uses venom not just to kill, but to begin controlling prey immediately after contact, reducing the risk that a struggling animal will escape or injure the snake. Every feature belongs to the same design: remain hidden, sense precisely, strike decisively, and let chemistry do the work. The tragedy is that the same design becomes almost impossible for people when medicine is far away. Antivenom is one of the great achievements of toxin medicine, but it is still tied to supply, timing, dose, transport, refrigeration, training, and species recognition. Against a full Bushmaster envenomation, a small number of vials can be like a bucket thrown into a rising river. The treatment may be correct and still not be enough. The clinic may know what is happening and still lack what is needed. The patient may begin the journey alive, while the nearest adequate stock sits on the other side of hours that cannot be skipped. That is why the Bushmaster makes the strongest ending to this story. Earlier, venoms may defeat medicine through speed, complexity, silence, or the absence of a true antidote. The Bushmaster defeats it through scale and distance. This is not a toxin that science cannot counter chemically. It is a venom delivered in such quantity, in such remote forest, from such a large and patient predator, that the cure can be buried beneath the sheer size of the event. In the dark primary rainforest, where a warm body can be seen without light and a strike can cross the gap faster than thought, the Bushmaster proves that sometimes the deadliest part of venom is not only what it does inside the blood. It is how much arrives, how far help is, and how quickly the forest turns time against you.